Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Best on Wellbeing podcast. It's been a little while since I've posted an episode, so I'm happy to be back and discuss something that I found very interesting this week. And I saw an article that discussed the science of kindness. And, in previous episodes, we've discussed about kindness and how if we can come at life with a framework, with a perception that we are all one, we are all connected, we are all unified. And therefore, when we deliberately engage in an act of kindness towards somebody else that assists them in their well-being and in elevating their well-being, ultimately we elevate our own well-being because we're all one, we're all connected. To bring somebody else up is to bring ourselves up. And so these kind of spiritual concepts can be certainly lovely to have in our minds, and I really do love sharing these kinds of ideas. But what struck me about what I read this week was the science behind it, the concrete physicality and the science behind the impact of kindness. And so this study showed basically took the participants and separate them into four groups. And they just to be clear, this study has been replicated, which is an important factor in science. We have to not just have one study, but we have to take the same design, replicate it in order to to look for truth and to see what's real. And what they did with this study, so they take these four different groups. One group is told to do nothing different, so it's the control group. One group is tasked with participating in art and beautiful things. So beautiful art, beautiful music, whether you look at it or you try to create it, but to engage in artful things. The third group was told to really try hard to be kind to themselves. And the fourth group was told to engage daily in acts of kindness towards others. And in this study, they actually took blood samples of each of the groups to follow inflammatory markers. There's ways in terms of blood tests to look for markers that are suggestive of more or less inflammation in the body. And what they found, I forget exactly how long it took place, I believe it was a couple of weeks. And what they found is afterwards, they took the blood samples before, went through this process, took the blood work after, and found that the group who engaged in daily acts of kindness towards others had the most reduction in inflammatory markers. Following that was the group that was kind to themselves, also had a reduction, but less than the fourth group who were acting kind towards others. Afterwards, those who engaged in artful things were also at a reduction, but less, and then the control group had no change. And so I thought this was a very fascinating study to show that kindness, to engage in daily acts of kindness towards others, has an anti-inflammatory effect on our body. In healthcare, when we talk about chronic diseases or chronic issues or chronic pain, all these different chronic problems are very often related to inflammation. And therefore, things that are anti-inflammatory, things that reduce inflammation in our body, is generally considered a very good thing to promote health span and longevity and just feeling good in our bodies, to consume or to do things that are anti-inflammatory is a good thing. And so kindness seems to be highly anti-inflammatory. And there was another study that did not look at blood markers, but just measures of well-being called eudaimonia. So eudaimonia, eudaimonic versus hedonic well-being. Eudaimonia is basically a deep sense of inner satisfaction and well-being versus, let's say, the well-being or the pleasure we get from, let's say, eating a very delicious meal from a master chef that just is really good and it gives a sense of well-being. It's very nice, but that's more of it like what we call hedonic well-being. But eudaimonic well-being is a deep sense of satisfaction, of meaning, of feeling really good on a deep level within. And they found again that if you look at acts of, to engage in art, or to be kind to yourself, or to be deliberately, daily kind to others, deliberate acts of kindness towards others, that the group that did the deliberate acts of kindness towards others had the most eudaimonia, the most deeper inner sort of well-being, using these kind of psychological measures. So both psychological measures in terms of our inner well-being and physical measures in terms of inflammatory markers showed that acts of kindness towards others seems to be highly effective for being kind, for feeling good within on a deep level, and very physically good for us in terms of having an anti-inflammatory effect. So very fascinating, very concrete stuff. The other interesting thing that some of the researchers looked at is the chain of events of an act of kindness, sort of the domino effect, if you will. That when someone has an act of kindness towards another, that will naturally elevate their well-being, and then will have the other person more likely to want to engage in an act of kindness for somebody else after that. And so it has like a knockoff event or a chain of events of kindness. And what they found is that very often, and on average, that chain would be 3 to 5 fold, or like 3 to 5 chains in terms of an act of kindness. So if somebody's kind to somebody else and they are more likely to be kind, they'll do an act of kindness to somebody else, and they'll do an act of kindness to somebody else. And so it'll be a domino effect up to 5 times, very commonly. And so this interesting finding is that when we engage in an act of kindness towards somebody else, we will not be able to perceive the ripple effect that it has. And people have actually looked at it very closely. There is a ripple effect. It's not just some cliche of something nice that we do, like, well, if you're not, you never know what's going to happen. It's like, well, we see that on very commonly, that ripple effect will go at least 3 to 5 sort of chains in a row of acts of kindness, which is also very fascinating. Now, I do think when we talk about these principles of kindness and the idea of being kind and deliberate acts of kindness towards others, very important to always bring a grain of salt, some balanced perspective. I can see, some people might hear something like this and it's like, okay, well, if acts of kindness are anti-inflammatory, I'm going to just be kind all the time, always, and therefore, reduce the inflammation in my body. I don't think it quite works like that either. We got to look at it from different perspectives. Good sleep is anti-inflammatory, but we can't sleep all the time. Blueberries and dark berries are generally anti-inflammatory, but we're not going to just eat blueberries all day to get the full anti-inflammatory effect. So it's obviously there's a balanced perspective to have about this, but it's important to realize that when we talk about having a framework in our lives, a compass that guides us to try every single day to be deliberate, intentional, creative, and looking for opportunities for acts of kindness towards others, and to engage in that kind of life, which we see has tremendous positive effects on our well-being and our body in terms of being anti-inflammatory, does not mean that we don't have boundaries. It does not mean that we don't say no, that we don't assert ourselves, okay? Daily acts of kindness does not equal being a doormat that everybody steps on and takes advantage of. That is not what we're talking about. So one way to perceive, because sometimes there are moments where like, do I want to do that? Do I not want to do that for somebody else? Like, sometimes it's okay to say no. But I thought a good measure to look at, a good way to balance the scales to see if it's worth it, is to ask ourselves, will the other benefit more than I will be inconvenienced by this act? And if the answer is yes, then it might be a good opportunity to go for it. If somebody's going to benefit a lot from a little bit of inconvenience towards you, it's a great opportunity to do an act of kindness. Okay. But sometimes the scales aren't like that. So sometimes people, because there's all sorts of humans out there, and some might want to take advantage or, be opportunistic with your sort of wanting to be kind. And so that part of our well-being is learning to be wise in those situations. So sometimes somebody might ask something from you that in terms of benefiting their well-being might not move the needle very much, but it's highly inconvenient for you. And so the balance is the other way. And that's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay. So it's okay to ask ourselves, is the benefit, the well-being that the other person will benefit from this act greater than the inconvenience to me? And if it is, then maybe it's a good idea to proceed. And if it's not, then it's okay to say no. It's okay to have boundaries. It's okay to put limitations. It's okay to be very assertive and a very kind but firm, no, thank you, not this time. But that being said, while we bring wisdom to having a balanced perspective towards kindness, it is still so lovely to consider these concepts that when we engage daily and look for opportunity, like kindness isn't just like these big acts of like, helping your buddy, move furniture when they're moving out. I mean, that can be really nice. And I've certainly had a lot of family and friends over the years help me with multiple moves. So not to underestimate that. But it can be little things, that extra smile, the extra pause with the cashier to say a really good thank you, or somebody wants to speak to you, and even though you don't have much time, you give them 5 minutes of full attention, and letting them know you only have 5 minutes to talk, but you're all there for them. And so the inconvenience of the 5 minutes you're giving them might bring them a tremendous amount of well-being to just really give them attention. So many ways to look at this, but the idea is that if we can engage on a daily basis to be creative, to be deliberate, to be intentional about seeking out acts of kindness, that is very beneficial to our well-being, both physical and internal. Another sort of important principle for kindness is to remember that it is not transactional. It's not like I'm going to be kind to the person in order for them to be kind to me. That certainly has transactional situations are very appropriate. There's businesses that have to have transactions. You have a transaction with your employer. You work so they pay you. Carpooling. This time you drive, next time I drive. Okay, those are transactional. Those are great. Those are important. Those are part of our civilization. So nothing wrong with that. But when we talk about a genuine act of kindness in the way we're talking about today, we're talking about an act where there is no sense of wanting to get back. There's none of that. The act is the gift. The act of kindness towards the other is the gift to ourselves. And so there's no sense of reciprocity. There's no sense that I'm going to be kind in order for them to reciprocate to me. That's a different thing. And again, in family situations with friends, sometimes we need to reciprocate. It's not the same thing here. And it's okay to demand that from our social interactions that, look, I've been doing a lot of things for you. I'd like you to, consider me here. And those things are okay too. But the act of kindness that we're looking at, trying to participate in daily act, when you look in the eyes of a cashier with the warmest smile you can possibly muster and say, thank you, I hope you have a good day. You're not doing it because you hope that she'll necessarily reciprocate to you. It's just the act of it is the gift to yourself. The act is the gift. And that's like a very important principle of kindness. So remember, folks, kindness is highly anti-inflammatory. Thank you very much. It's great to be back. We'll catch you all next time.